Hello, everybody. This is Zach Said It Again. I'm your host, Zach Kool-Aid, and I'm honored to close out the second season of this podcast with an actor, friend, and fellow Wythevillian that I am honored to have on the phone with me today, Roger Dean Grubb. Thank you for being with me, Roger.
It's a pleasure to talk to you, Zach.
Well, I'm delighted to have you on the program, and I have been a long-time admirer of yours. I have seen you act at Border Theater. I've seen you act locally. I've admired much of your handiwork on many of the sets, probably every set of plays that I've seen at Wytheville Community College, George Wythe High School, just all around. And having met you and have come to know you personally over the years, it's been a privilege to call you a friend. And you have taken on my very favorite story of all time, not just favorite holiday story, but favorite story of all time, A Christmas Carol, and done it in a one-man show, a phenomenal one-man show, I might add. And the only other time I have seen that is from your friend and colleague, John Hardy. Now, you said that you took some inspiration from him to do this one-man Christmas Carol show, but what inspired you to take on this show? Because it's a very difficult role to do, as well as I know. Oh, this was in the book, that wasn't in the book, as well as
right.
and I read it to my wife and daughter every year. As well as I know it, I would never want to be the one responsible for telling an audience a story in a dramatic way, because once you get up there, if you're doing a one-man show, it's a minimal set, minimal props. It is up to you, and you got to tell that story. And for somebody like me who was sitting out in the audience, you got to tell it right, because people who know that story backward and forward, they're going to know when you don't get it right. So, first of all, what enabled you to, or what inspired you to take that on, and how were your feelings up there the first night?
Well, like you, I just absolutely adore that story. I make it a habit to read the book every December. I've had a copy of the book for years, and I have, as they say, I have read it to tatters. I had to buy myself a new copy of it last year because my old one was just falling apart. And so I adore the story. I always have. I'm not sure why, but and every time any version of it comes on television, I watch it. I will stop and watch it. I own several DVDs of different versions of it. The Reginald Owen, the Alistair Sim, the George C. Scott, and some really obscure ones. And I guess it was it 2 years ago when John first put up his production. John Hardy put up his production on it down at the Lincoln Theater.
It was 2 years ago that I first saw it. Yeah. I don't know if he had done it before.
A friend of mine gifted me, taking me down there to see it. Of course, John and I had worked together for several seasons at Border Theater, and so when I saw him do it, it was stunning. Of course, everything John does is stunning. He's a brilliant actor. He's a brilliant director. He directed me in one show at Barter Theater, and just a brilliant man. So I was not surprised to see that his production of A Christmas Carol was just stunning. And I had never really had any idea, any thought that a person could do a one-man version of A Christmas Carol. So at that time, I thought if I ever had the opportunity, I'd like to take this on myself. I knew it was a mountain of a thing to do, but the opportunity came about this fall. My friend Joe Burnett, who has kind of eased into the director role at the community college, was actually planning on putting up a different show, and that, through no fault of his own, it didn't work out. So he came to me and said, "Do you have any ideas?" So I had several unproduced scripts here at the house that I'd bought and were interested in, and we went through those, and none of those were going to work out. I said, "Well, the last thing I have here is a one-man version of A Christmas Carol." And he said, "Well, you want to do it?" And I said, "Well, I do, but wow, is this thing scary?" So, but I agreed to go ahead and do it, and it's been a lot of work, obviously. 31 pages of dialogue, more than 20 characters, around 25, 26 characters. But I thought, well, what the heck? Let's give it a try. So what made it easier was that I love the story. I absolutely adore the story. And I was also able, to know that I was going to be able to voice different characters, and I absolutely love doing voices. So it was a little bit of an easy decision, just a daunting one. That's the word we've decided describes putting up a one-man production of A Christmas Carol. The word is daunting. Mm-hmm. I had to approach it, in a little different way than a normal script. I did most of my rehearsing here at home, down in my workshop. I cleared out a space that I could walk around, and I cut the script up into 10 or 11 page segments, and I would work on those one at a time and individually, and eventually started being able to sew those pieces together. And it just kind of went from there. It's still daunting. Before every performance, I'm not typically someone who gets nervous before a show, but this one really makes you stop and and think and concentrate. And before I come through that door every night, I say out loud to myself, attack this show. Just attack it. You're telling a story. Tell the story. And, remind myself how much I love the story. And that makes it easier. That I hope that I'm not reciting a story, but that I'm actually telling a story. Of course, on stage, you're telling it into the dark. There are people out there, but also know people are listening. So I hope it comes across that way, that I'm telling a story and not just reciting a play. And I hope that it comes across that way to you and the other people in the audience.
Well, let me tell you this. The thing that separates, and this is why I think I would recommend your program and John Hardy's program equally. Go see them both. What a blessing it was to be able to see both shows this season. My mother lives in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which is 6 hours away. So we only see each other a couple times a year. And the reason that I love A Christmas Carol is because that was my mother's favorite story. And I think it started with her. She had the Dickens Village, which are the porcelain houses and the fake snow that you set up across the fireplace. Are you familiar with that? And then when I was 5 years old, she recorded for me on VHS Mickey's Christmas Carol because I was a Mickey Mouse nut. Still am, and I'm 40 years old, and I still am. I watched that year round, not just at Christmas time. I watched it year round, and I rewound. I had a grandmother that had the nickname Duck, so Grandma Duck is in the Fezziwig scene where she's clapping along. So I rewound that over and over and over so I could see Grandma Duck. I rewound it over and over and over so that I could see Goofy play Marley, who was voiced by Hal Smith, who's Otis on Andy Griffith, another one of my favorite characters in the world. And since then, I watched every episode, collected every book I could get my hands on, still collect them to this day. 10 Christmases ago, my mother gave me a gilded leather-bound pocket copy of Christmas Carol, which I was tempted to carry with me to your show. And I'm glad I didn't, because at the point when you say, I've lost my luggage, I have no copy to read from you, does anybody have one? I could have whipped that out and said, yes, sir, I have one right here.
Well, hopefully I'm prepared for that if anyone ever does it.
I was going to say, at that point, what would you have done? Would you just have ignored me and pretend like you didn't hear anything? Or
I have a couple of options. I hope it doesn't come up, but a good actor, a good performer has to prepare for different things. And so I won't tell you what, but
right.
I am prepared.
So if I come back next week, I'm going to throw it at you, and we'll see what you come up with.
Well, the great thing about this show is that immediately what they call the fourth wall is broken.
Right.
So, and even more so, an interesting aspect that people who don't perform, there are things they don't think about. One in particular is that typically when you are doing a stage production, as I've done, I don't know how many hundreds over the years, but when you step on the stage, you are coming from the wings or from backstage. The stage lights are already on, so the house is dark, and you know there's an audience there. You just don't have a good inkling of how many or where or what. And even if you're doing
does it make a difference if it's 50 or 250?
Well, it can. The interesting part of this is that I'm not walking out into the dark and guessing. When I'm walking into a fully lit auditorium, not only do I know there's an audience there, I can see the audience. And that is one huge difference in this show, that I come in, I actually see how many people there are. I can see their faces. I break that fourth wall immediately, and it can make a difference. It's a little more difficult if it's a smaller crowd, because of when you're on stage, sometimes you'll get an audible feedback, if things are going well, but sometimes you can just feel it. You can actually feel an audience being with you. So size sometimes does matter, and it makes it sometimes a little more difficult if it's a smaller crowd, but breaking that wall immediately, I think in this show, it takes some of the pressure off of me right away, because you don't have to wait for a connection. Hopefully, you make the connection right then, and that establishes a link with the audience. It's still a difficult show to do, but that takes part of the pressure off. Actually, seeing their faces before the house goes dark and the stage lights come on. A lot of people, people who don't do theater wouldn't be aware of that oddity.
Right.
This is a very rare thing to happen in theater, to actually go face to face with an audience before you begin the play itself. So it's very interesting. It's something I've never done before, and but I love interesting things. That's many of the roles I've taken on is because they were interesting things to me.
How do you feel now, having performed it twice? Do you feel like you've realized a dream? How do you feel?
Well, I wouldn't call it a dream exactly, but it's another thing that I'm glad that I've done.
More like you've achieved a goal.
Well, it's a different thing. I enjoy doing things I've never done before. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I'll just do that. Case in point, if I can step away from this for a minute, if I find something that's interesting to me, I will try it and see how it goes. Back in the spring, last spring, I tend to, in warm weather, sit on my porch at night and just sit and rock and listen. And I had a story forming in my head, a short story. So I decided to write it down or start working on it. Well, I worked on it, and I decided to submit it. And lo and behold, I actually won the fiction portion of the Chautauqua writing contest. And I'd never written anything before. So it's that type of thing. It's like, I've never done this, so let's try this and see how it goes. I'm always interested in doing new things. I produce art and whatnot in my workshop, and I've actually won awards with that, things I've never done before. So this is another one of those things. It's like, I've never done this. This looks very interesting, scary, but it looks interesting. And so let's try this. I'm always one for trying new things, and if they work, that's great. If they don't, it's just another experience. I'm all about having new experiences. That's just and I feel that everybody should do that. Just try things. Just try things. If they don't work, so what? And if they do work, great. And if they don't, you've had another experience. So that's what this play was to me, was another new experience to try. And I'm very glad that I agreed to do it. It's been scary and daunting and exhausting, so tiring. But when it's over, I think I will miss it. I really do.
Well, I hope the crowds are there for you. I know I have been promoting your play left, right, and sideways. And I do hope that the second week brings bigger crowds. There was a crowd of about 50 or so in a house of about 233, I think. And so not horrible for Wytheville, but not all that great either. But what I noticed about the crowd, I know some of those ladies. I went to church with some of those ladies for years, and they're great people. And I noticed as you came rushing in, not a lot of people who are not familiar with theater. Typically, when the star rushes in, it is common courtesy for the audience to applaud, but not a lot of people know to do that are not, in the background. But I think it was spontaneous that when you came rushing in after Joe did his call for Mr. Dickens, the audience, I think you had them right then. as you read about Bob Cratchit, they involuntarily applauded, and I think you had them then because you come in and we know right away that you are Charles Dickens because not everybody knows because I've read The Man Who Invented Christmas. I think it's a brilliant film. I've read the book. Les Standiford wrote the book that the film was based on, starring Dan Stevens. And Charles Dickens was, as all of us writers are, very flighty, very, easily discombobulated.
Right.
Very, very fly by the seat of your pants. And
that you brought that up about Joe introducing me. That a lot of times, hopefully, sometimes you have to put in devices in a show. Sometimes they're necessary. Sometimes for particular reasons. In this particular version of Christmas Carol, there's actually no introduction of Charles Dickens. That's not part of the written part that Mr. Bodine actually wrote. But I was talking to Joe, our director, and I said, I know the character is in the playbill. I also know that sometimes people don't look closely at a playbill. And so I actually asked Joe to introduce me by name. I said that way it will establish who my character is, because some people may not realize that if they haven't looked closely at the playbill. So I actually, kind of invented that part. I said it'll be a nice little comedy bit, and also establish what I need to be established, that my character is in fact Charles Dickens.
Right.
So that was to work, and I've employed a couple other devices in the show. I saw in your glowing review, thank you very much for that, about me particularly sipping from a mug during different times in the production. That is not in there. That's a device I employed. I also told Joe, I said that I'm talking for nearly an hour and a half, and my mouth is going to get really dry. I have to find a way to take a drink once in a while, or my voice is going to go away. And so I actually kind of added that. I said, at times, here and there's a good time for me to take a drink. Sometimes I'll just casually do it in the middle of a monologue. I said, but that way I can hydrate during the show, and hopefully it'll look natural. I said also that I tend to sweat a lot, especially when I'm wearing heavy costuming. So I said I'll also be carrying a bandana in my pocket, and there are a couple of times when it's appropriate for me to do it. I said one time what I will do is establish early on during the opening sequence, I will pull out that bandana and wipe my forehead in consternation as Dickens, but that will establish, that won't look odd when it comes out later when I'm actually wiping sweat off my forehead. So it's a little bit sneaky, but
you can do it in places when Scrooge is fraught with fear, when he is weeping, when Bob Cratchit is weeping for his son, which always gets me, no matter how many times I've seen it. As a father of a single child,
So there are devices sometimes that these are, as Marty would say, of my own procuring.
Right.
So I installed those. Hopefully, they would look natural, but also to serve a big need, which is hydration and removing perspiration. And early on for Joe to actually establish that I am Charles Dickens. So there are things behind the scenes that people aren't aware of, but I'll let you in on it since it's just you and me.
Sure. And
now you know all there is to know about theater.
Right. Well, and there's a wonderful play by Tom Mueller that I've seen several times at the Barter. It's probably the best play I've ever seen at Barter because you see it at stage 2 and it's like you're right there. And it is called Jacob Marley's Christmas Carol. And Tom Mueller took that. I have done this from my own procuring for you, Ebenezer, and built a whole story around how did Marley procure it, and we see his story and how he got.
Yeah, that's interesting. And there are different backstories of Marley, of course. When about, I guess, I don't know, 22 years ago, something like that, I did play Marley in Scrooge the Musical. Of course, they employ a longer, more story of Marley where he goes to hell and comes back.
Exactly.
Which is an interesting device.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, Marley is a very interesting character. It's fascinating. But yes, when he says of my own procuring, and people who pay attention go, I wonder how is it that he came here? What brought him here? That type of thing. There's some interesting aspects of A Christmas Carol. That I'm sure since you're such a big fan of it, you see a few things and you go, I wonder about that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of which is I point out to people on a semi-regular basis that Scrooge himself wasn't an entirely bad man.
He was not, because he does willingly allow Bob Cratchit. Bob doesn't force him. He willingly says, I suppose you must have the whole day. That's something that I catch every time, and he is not completely without feelings. Why else would the ghost bother to interfere for him if he was beyond all hope? And he even says that when he has the unimaginable horror of reading his own name on a grave. He even says that. Why show me this if I'm past all hope? He's a very Go ahead.
He pays Cratchit. He not only gives him the day off, he pays him.
Mm-hmm.
He gives him a paid day off.
Mm-hmm.
And when he didn't have to. So yes, he is not beyond hope. And I think that's maybe one of the fine points of the story that may escape some people. Not just that people can change, but no one is beyond hope. Everyone has at least a small amount of good in them.
Because we all are human. We all are created by the same God. If you are of the belief that I am, and we were not made to be evil.
It's just a fascinating story. It really is. I think that's why I love it so much. It's just fascinating.
Well, I think it's very relevant to times today and human nature today. Unfortunately, in terms of what Scrooge refers to as the surplus population, I relate to that very personally because I, as a disabled man, am the surplus population. I have to fight every day to be a part of society. My wife and I have to fight very hard every day to pay our bills and things like that because the government does not want to encourage people with any kind of affliction to lead normal lives. It's just as easy if you're looking at it from their side. It is just as easiest. In fact, if I were completely off the planet, but since they can't do that, they want to throw me into an institution where they'll have me under control for the rest of my life. But
well, I will say that you've been very kind about being an admirer of mine, but I can tell you, Zach, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people here in this town, in this area, who really admire you. That is the truth. You're always up. You're always cheerful when I meet you. You're always positive, and there are hundreds of people, thousands of people who admire you, and you should take a moment at some point and pat yourself on the back. You are an amazing person.
Well,
and an inspiration to just hundreds of thousands of people. You truly are. I don't know if you know that, but you should know that.
Well,
people should know that.
You are very kind, and that right there, sir, is why I record our interviews, so I have things like this to show to people. Yes, that's what Roger Dean Grubb said about me. So there you are.